Let's just keep it rolling. We got everything framed up good right now. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Pride. You are a star. You are created by stripes of every color, of every size. We are the mountains. We are the tide that question whether we're destined to pay bills and die. Freedom to grow our own medicine was jettisoned. Tesla's inventions were replaced by Thomas Edison's. Now I'm under pressure, got questions, I wonder why I don't see more people fighting for our sons and daughters who gotta struggle for their right to a clean glass of water, whose homes wash away while this planet gets hotter, who are born into a land that we filled with slaughter. Now to tell me what's it gonna take? Got our babies paying for our fathers' mistakes. Scientists are being silenced cause these bankers eat cake. A person's worth should not be measured by the money they make. It's in our hearts, it's what we do, it's in our art. The love we give to others makes us who we are. You are a star, my love. You are created by stripes of every color, of every size. You got to take your time finding where to go. If you move too fast, you're gonna lose control. You got to fast unwind, let your spirit grow. We'll tear the oppressors down, freedom is our goal. Darkness is creeping in regardless of the light that we shine on the heartless. The haters keep hating, you are immigrating, we're alienating you Martians. I can hear all the little ones' hearts and they are pouting for change. They know that she can't take no more. Mother Earth will make her people go. Surrounded by chaos, momentum will grow. You cannot control us, we'll find in our flow. The road to victory is the way we will go. We're taking our time so we know it's for sure. Oh, my people, ooh, yeah. Take your time finding where to go. If you move too fast, you're gonna lose control. You got to fast unwind, let your spirit grow. We'll tear the oppressors down, freedom is our goal. Our
Hello everybody, this is Britt with Mythril Media, reaching out to you from quarantine in Norwich, Connecticut. My partner Gabe is joining me from behind the camera. Welcome to our third full-length update. On Wednesday, April 22nd, the creatures of the planet Earth celebrated our 50th Earth Day. Now that so many of us are being told to stay at home and forced to consume less, we find ourselves in the perfect moment to take the time to truly reflect on each of our ecological impacts and ask ourselves, after 50 years of Earth Day, is the planet really in any better shape now than it was 50 years ago? With this in mind, on the eve of this special and symbolic holiday, Academy Award-winning filmmaker Michael Moore released a new film, which you can watch for free on his YouTube channel. He, along with co-producer Ozzie Zenner and director, writer, and all-around, you name it, he did it, freshman filmmaker Jeff Gibbs, have been working on this documentary for over a decade and had originally planned for an official theatrical release this fall following the COVID-19 outbreak. The film is called Planet of the Humans. About 90 minutes long, this deeply moving and eye-opening documentary brings to light many harsh truths of capitalist corruption within the green energy movement, and it bravely exposes the ironic, dark side of the green manufacturing industry. In Planet of the Humans, Gibbs has the ovaries to specifically call out many prominent figures in the green movement whose hearts have not always been in the right place, such as former Vice President Al Gore, activist Bill McKibben, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and more, while also showing the audience its own place within this issue by presenting them with many hard-hitting questions, such as, can machines made by industrial civilization really be used to save us from industrial civilization? Does alternative energy actually replace fossil fuels when they're so dependent on them to produce the energy? How did we ever get convinced that this technology is green? And are we trying to save the planet or save our way of life? Planet of the Humans will challenge you to suspend your belief in the stories that you have been told about how to save the planet. It focuses on making it clear that the solution to the crisis of environmental collapse is not as easy as climate change plus renewables equals we're saved. To put it all simply, we all need to consume less because we've already gone too far. Solar panels are not the only green energy faction under fire in this film, although they do get their fair share of the spotlight. A good amount of screen time is given to environmental movements and issues within Gibbs and Michael Moore's home state of Michigan, including the not-so-green truths behind the Chevy Volt electric car by General Motors, which is not unfamiliar territory for Michael Moore. At one point, Gibbs interviews General Motors representative Kristen Zimmerman, who admits that General Motors Chevy Volt stations are plugged into their office building, which is plugged into the local grid in Lansing, which runs off 95% coal. Planet of the Humans also covers a handful of local ecological issues occurring in the green state of Vermont. At the beginning of the documentary, Gibbs visits a solar music festival, which was advertised as running off of 100% solar power. Although, when the weather began to turn to rain, Gibbs' camera crew goes backstage and almost comically discovers the stage crew setting up biodiesel generators. A crew member reveals to Gibbs that the festival is only primarily run off solar. The panels powered the lights on the stage, and even in spite of the biofuel generators, they still ended up having to plug into the local electrical power grid to keep the lights running anyway. The film then eventually moves on to show how this exact problem exists at even the most green and industrial levels of energy production, when once again, in the green state of Vermont, Gibbs hikes with a group of concerned Vermont citizens to a mountaintop removal site that was being developed for the installation of 21 wind turbines. Turbines that are only projected to last around 20 years before we will have to tear them down and rebuild all over again. Not only would this take an incredible amount of energy and natural resources just to create these turbines, they still require a backup fossil fuel generator to constantly idle just in case the wind slows, because we have not yet mastered the proper green energy storage. Gibbs also criticizes environmentalists who support biomass, such as renowned activist Bill McKibben and his organization 350.org, for, quote, suggesting we get out of bed with coal companies and into bed with logging companies, end quote. The documentary shows footage of the opening ceremony for the Middlebury Biomass Facility, held at Middlebury College in Vermont, where Bill McKibben was invited to be the guest speaker. During his speech, he refers to the burning of biomass, insisting, quote, "It must happen everywhere," end quote, despite the fact that the burning of biomass uses more natural gas to create wood-based ethanol than ethanol is created to replace the natural gas. Planet of the Humans also highlights a hypocrisy within the dogwood biomass campaign platform. Quote, "Burning forests for energy will destroy one of our best defenses against climate change," end quote. Gibbs drives his point home on an industrial scale when he takes his audience to the largest solar plant in the world, the Ivanpah Solar Array in the Mojave Desert, California, which recently halted production due to blatant inefficiency. Funded by Bright Source Energy under former Mayor Arnold Schwarzenegger, this plant was designed as an enormous field of mirrors in the middle of a desert focused onto a central tower. In order to power up an array of such a large size every day, producer and Green Illusions author Ozzie Zenner reveals to the camera that the plant needed to burn natural gas for hours each morning just to start up. Plus, the plant was required to file for a number of permits that do not suggest sustainable green energy production, such as an acid rain permit and a carbon offset permit. Planet of the Humans does the job of showing that, although touted as a green energy triumph, the environmental impact behind this massive solar array and the many other ones like it is anything but the truth. For example, where do solar panels come from? The film tells us to start in a mine. Panels are made from a combination of high-quality quartz, mined, and coal, which is melted together in a large furnace, releasing silicon metal and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Once the panels are ready to be installed, the documentary explains that if they are intended for a massive solar array plant, the land must be cleared and prepped, which inevitably leads to irreversible ecological destruction and desertification, such as the tragic clearing of an ancient Joshua tree and a field of the ancient Joshua trees and yucca plants in the American Southwest for projects such as the Ivanpah Solar Array. These panels and their non-renewable batteries are only built to last for about 10 years, at which they will degrade and need to be replaced. Gibbs is repeatedly reminded by solar salespeople that, quote, "renewables are intermittent," end quote, and that since only 1/10 of the power needed is available at any time, without non-renewable battery storage, biofuels will be needed to back up that solar power and keep that system steady at all times, especially on a town-wide level. In reality, much like biomass, solar infrastructure takes more energy to produce than it saves. Filmmaker Jeff Gibbs' lifelong passion for the environment is clear and honest throughout the entire production. There is a sense that people may be desperate to accept any idea that seems green, as long as they can continue to keep living their lives and consuming in the way that they have been. Yet, you will be reminded that it is crucial to keep fighting for all of the species of the environment and not nihilistically accept a doomed fate, because if the human species does not curb their consumption and prevent profit from being valued over life itself by capitalism, then we will undoubtedly take many innocent things with us on our way to extinction. Although this is a family-friendly film technically, and it should be watched by audiences across the spectrum, it is important to note that it is not always easy to watch. You will see footage of indigenous peoples, as well as endangered species being displaced and destroyed with no consequence. If you're a crier, such as myself, be prepared with some tissues, but at least be prepared to be thinking about the subject matter for days. In fact, Ozzie Zenner suggests not watching it alone if you can help it, because the content is so psychologically moving that you will want to talk about it with someone once the movie is over. But remember, we will come out of the other side only if we have the courage to face the darkness that we helped to create. Michael Moore, Ozzy Zenner, and Jeff Gibbs have gotten together a few times virtually over the last couple weeks to discuss Planet of the Humans and celebrate the success of its free YouTube release, including 2 episodes on Michael Moore's podcast, Rumble. On episode 72, Gibbs told a story about being a young, conflicted environmentalist that I wanted to share with you all today because it reminded me of myself and also so many people that I have met on what we call the crunchier road. Quote, "I was a young hippie. I thought I could traipse off into the woods and I'm going to build a log cabin. I'm going to burn wood instead of fossil fuels. So I buy myself 20 acres of land. So what's the first things I have to do? Buy a bulldozer and a chainsaw. So I make a rationalization with myself. Oh, I'm the woods guy. I'm helping nature. I'll make up for this somehow. And I can't afford solar panels. So I have to go get a generator because solar panels are really expensive. But then I find out that people have solar panels and the generator. Okay, now I have to drive into work every day. And now I put myself in the woods. And now I'm making noise, I'm chopping wood, I'm burning stuff, I'm causing pollution. And it didn't dawn on me until much later when we started making this film that I wasn't some genius nature guy. You know, green. I was nature's worst nightmare because I was coming in and carving out my own little spot while making my own rationalizations." End quote. I encourage you to please take the time out of your quarantine to find Planet of the Humans on Michael Moore's YouTube channel and really watch it. Really pay attention to what the film is trying to tell you. And then please share it with your family and your friends. It's free. And it's crucial that we get this important message out to as many people on the planet as we can and as soon as possible. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this report. And go check out this movie as soon as I finished reading to you the final few pages of the first part of Vivian's story, Unbowed, by Cassandra Kaw, in our next segment. I'm going to go get comfy, and I'll see you all in just a moment. Welcome to our third reading of Unbowed by Cassandra Kaw. Last time I read this story to you, we were with Vivian and Frederick. Vivian being a planeswalker from the plane of Scala, Frederick being a vampire from the plane of Ixalan, where we currently reside. We were entering into the city of Luno, which is pretty much run by the ruling class, ministry class of vampires. Vivian has just entered. Frederick took her to see the menagerie, which was a collection of animals and creatures, dinosaurs, from around Ixalan. And Vivian was not very happy with how they were being treated. She is now going to be entering into the perfumed court, meeting other people from Luno, and she is going to be seeing a performance at the menagerie this evening. If you are an animal lover, this story may be hard for you at times, but you, trust me, will also get yours in the end. So here we go. Vivian schooled her voice for politeness. A smile tipped into place. Charm was too much to ask for. The reflections regarded them from every angle of the high-ceilinged building. Where the architecture wasn't indigo stone, it was gold and shining metal, florid marquetry and grand stucco work, oil lamps and mage lights cunningly positioned to ensure no one might ever need squint against an unseemly glare. It held, in Vivian's opinion, all the tenderness and compassion absent from certain other elements of Luno. Forgive me, but All I saw were cages full of sick and dying animals and a hall resplendent with a circus of cadavers. Her mouth pinched. If this was your pride and joy, you may wish to consider investing in another. To her surprise, Frederick laughed, gauzy and unperturbed by the warning grooved in her tone. Mademoiselle, if we turned ourselves inside out to keep everything alive, where would we put them all? The royal menagerie is the largest of its kind in Ixalan, but it is not magic. Besides, how would the Baron pursue his science if there were no bodies to use in an autopsy? The corridor spread into a palatable lobby. Above them, a vaulted ceiling frescoed with ships in conflict with the Kraken. Waitstaff ferried brass plates laden with goblets through a growing crowd of courtiers, their corpuses doubled in the mirror-plated floor. The clothes did not make the monk, Vivian thought to herself. No matter how they primped and perfumed themselves, no matter how many acres of crushed velvet that they draped over bodies embalmed in dark magic, how they played at refinement, these creatures were still corpses. Frederick patted Vivian's hand, and it took all of her to not slap his fingers away. By the way, Frederick said, exchanging air kisses with a pale woman who barely deigned to glance at Vivian, her cleavage frosted with a diamond dust. I must congratulate you on your sense of timing. You chose the perfect occasion to visit Luno. And why is that? The woman turned, snapping open a fan. Lace foamed at her collar and down along the ends of her sleeves, wove into the gaudy edifice of her alabaster wig. She alone of the attendees smelled of nothing but mausoleums, and marrow, and bone, and dirt. Poor thing! Did they teach you nothing from where you come from, mademoiselle? Tonight's festivities are famous across Ixalan. It is, a sigh, as if to broadcast the burden that was translation. The Tordian with the truculent thunder. Did I say that correctly, Frederick? No. Don't tell me. I don't care enough. She pumped her fan slowly. A beauty mark punctuated her philtrum. Just know that you are unbearably fortunate, mademoiselle. There are rules in Luno who would hawk their firstborns to attend this gala. Honestly, Frederick, why did you even bring her? For novelty, I imagine. Vivian's attention made an orbit of the space. Too many of them and too little known of what they were capable. She would have to wait and watch and wonder for the time being. Like everything else in this place. Tittering greeted Vivian's riposte, high-pitched and theatrical, while Frederick looked on like an indulgent uncle. Sweet mercies, this one has teeth. What a delight, my dear. Before Vivian could marshal her rage, double doors creaked apart, admitting first a straight-backed couple in gaudily elaborate regalia, their skulls crested with ivory wigs. Of the two, the woman, severe and slim, appeared less comfortable with the finery. She had a hunter's stalk, the gait of someone more accustomed to leathers, and the thump of a sword against her hip. Despite that faint air of unease, her expression was beatific, and was the look worn by her partner, a gaunt-faced man with immaculate facial hair, shoulders stooped as though weighed down by the crown he wore like a burden. King Lucard and Queen Salazar, Frederick murmured into Vivian's ear, his breath cold on the lobe. You should bow to them. She flicked a look behind her. No. The sovereign rulers of Luno tipped their heads, and the crowd responded in kind. The women curtsied, the men bowed. The heels of their palms pressed to their hearts. Alone of them, Vivian stood unbowed, chin tipped up. The assembled gentry straightened as the royals drifted past. children in teal frocks coming to take hold of their trains. If any of them took notice of her impudence, they did not think it fit to comment. "Audacious," murmured Frederick's pale acquaintance as she rose again to her full height. "You have such interesting tastes in friends." "Only the finest." The doors opened again. A hush ran through congregation. From the penumbra emerged a rangy fellow clad simply in a cassock, white hands steepled at his sternum. His manner exuded a choreographed austerity, every motion imbued with purpose. He raised his head, and the crowd sighed at the sight of him, an ecstatic noise. Vivian cocked her head. "And who is he?" "The Baron of Verneau," the woman sighed, fanning herself, tongue wrapping around the honorific, cradling it like a newborn messiah. "Marsois Jean Jacquin. He rules over the royal menagerie and the wonders in the Hall of Treasures." "Monsieur, mademoiselles." The Zephidian gaze found Vivian through the press of bodies, lidded and lazy, held her, golden sap, hoping to drown an unsuspecting insect. "Special guests, we are ready for you." The opening act spoiled the breath in Vivian's lungs, left her panting, and she sat, blood seeping from where her nails gouged half-moons into her palms, as a man wafted a torch beneath a lizard's belly. It shrilled while its hide blackened in the fire, splotches of color radiating from the burns, arabesques of puce and orange, Venice trails of fading blue, its terror coaxed into an art. The show only grew worse thereon. The performers brought forward bears in ill-fitting frocks and absurd panniers, raptors dressed as marquises, viscountesses incarnated as knock-kneed cranes, waltzing across hot coals in halting leaps. Each was tortured, tormented, teased in turn, while the audience howled song titles to a brass cabaret in the pit, and the monarchs of Luneau conversed with their ministers. "This is cruelty," Vivian hissed, half risen from her seat, voice coarsened by rage. "No, this is entertainment." Frederick sucked at his teeth and clenched fingers around her wrist. "Now sit down, Mademoiselle Reed, please." The crowd roared as the band laid down a triumphant anthem, brass scaffolding, a rolling, rippling drumbeat. Something was happening. Vivian jerked her attention toward the stage, a finger hooked over her arc-bow's string. "Ladies and gentlemen," there he was once more, the priest of this place. The man stood alone, no accoutrement or accessory, no chains of office. Black robes, calcium-pale hands raised to the masses. The music dimmed to a shiver of a flute, like some lonely thing dying in the dark. "I thank you for your patience, your tolerance of the lesser acts. We know why you were here." Silence washed over the Colosseum, taut. The man commanded at their gazes, hollowed in his pulpit of light. He lowered his voice as Vivian took aim, his voice a holy hush. "Our finest spend their months in the savage wilderness, stalking through the undergrowth. They wage war against nature, they die in droves, all in service to your pleasure." Here his tone warmed, and the crowd murmured in pleasure. "All in pursuit of the grandest of prizes, the finest of monsters to bring home to you. Tonight's specimen is particularly intriguing, a behemoth even the Golden City fears. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to this evening's most special guest." And the curtains drew back, red velvet pulled away by lush ropes of braided gold. The spotlights abandoned the man in black and joined like hands laced in prayer, illuminating a route for whatever would soon emerge. From the dark, something screamed its rage. A new Monstrosaur from the depths of the Ixalan jungles, whispered the Baron, his voice carrying like a curse. More impressive even than our breeding pair. Fiercer, still full of that primal fire. That sound. It wasn't the Brontodon. It couldn't be. Vivian knew ruminants. They did not have the throat for such sounds. There wasn't space in a body like that. No room with the multiplicity of stomachs, the knowledge of death riding low in their bellies. This was something else, something bigger, angrier, something that'd eat up the world if it was given half the chance, and judging by that call, it wanted nothing less. It ached to swallow them whole. But the shambling, sad thing that emerged from the gloom could barely hold itself upright, let alone put up a fight. Vivian forgot herself at the horror that stumbled into view, a gasp rasping up her throat. The creature was once massive, majestic even, but now it stood stooped and sunken, starved of everything but fury. Someone had tortured it. Someone, Vivian realized with a pang of horror, had plucked the largest teeth from its head. I am done. The arcbow sang out at the downward stroke of Vivian's finger, suddenly lambent with power, and Scala as it was, as it should have been, as it should have stayed, was alive again, if only for that moment. The audience did not care. Not for Vivian, or for the plight of the Monstrosaur. And why would they? Vivian thought. Nothing mattered to these vampires but their games, their posturing and preening jibes. Soldiers advanced on the creature, a flashing half-circle of steel and plumed hats. Their caution was performative. There was no way it could have retaliated. Not like this. Not with manacles on every limb. Its hide stippled with scars, 2 men at each end tugging its hunched body down low. Nonetheless, that didn't make its suffering less of a sport for its audience. If anything, it seemed to delight the crowd. This way, the soldiers had space for invention. What misery those soldiers brought to being. They worked holes through the Monstrosaur's hide with their pike tips, constellations of new wounds amid a patchwork nebulae of scars. They scratched at its eyes, one already filmed with milk, the other jaundiced and rolling in its socket. They worried at its body like crows or dogs or spoiled children drunk on the absence of consequence. "Madam, please." Before Frederick could speak another word, Vivian notched an arrow, and before Frederick could breathe out, she let go. The wood blazed green as a projectile sang through the air. It hit the floor beside where the man in black stood, shaft trembling from the impact, and Vivian had enough time to salute him, 2 fingers to smiling lips, before the seething, glimmering green outline of a hydra wrenched itself from the arrowhead and howled its hunger for the world to see. Luno did not know how to contend with hydras. It had, over the years, learned to accommodate dinosaurs and megafauna of comparable size, but these were separate taxonomies of dangers. The wildlife of Ixalan, while ferocious, responded to decapitation in the traditional fashion. They laid down and died. The Hydra, however, did not. The fact it was made of magic did not help either. 2 of its heads, shimmering and green, took hold of a screaming noble. One dug its jaws into his shoulder. The other latched onto a calf. They pulled, and he came apart. Vivian loped down through the stands and into the stampede of evacuating guests, guards racing behind her, shouting for the planeswalker to stop. The planeswalker continued to run. She vaulted over a duke who dropped to his knees, wig clinging to his skull by a strip of sweat-soaked prayer. She ran as the monstrosaur, forgotten by its handlers, roared in defiance. In the chaos that had ensued, the beast had snapped a leg, trying and failing to snare one of the fleeing performers. Bone protruded from the rage of its knee, but that wasn't enough to dissuade it. It screamed. For retribution, for rage, for whatever ineffable hope that dragged it forward, inch by inch, toward the guards advancing on the Hydra. The dinosaur swung its head, teeth found flesh, the hollow of a poorly armored hip. It bit down, crippled. It had no way to stand, but it could still pendulate its skull, still crush its quarry against the mortar and the marquetry of the stage, the body inside the ornate armor rendering to bone-bitten mush. And as it did, it screamed, and this time there was triumph in the noise. Vivian swiveled, fell to a knee, took aim, and let fly an arrow. The palaka worm launched itself forward, all mouth and sinuous body glowing green. The guards paused, dumbstruck by the sight. Vivian did not wait for the aftermath. She stood instead and renewed by her sprint toward the stage, even as screaming rose up at her back, the sound quickly muffled by the snap of the worm's jaws. She didn't have to look. She knew what would follow. As was often the case with the worm's victims, they likely died with astonishment on their faces. No one ever expects to be perfectly bite-sized. Vivian leapt onto a railing and allowed the momentum to carry her down. She knocked an arrow and fired again. On this occasion, it was an herbivore that burst from the point of impact, staggering coat-legged onto an uneven canter, the stag. Body a carapace like a pangolin, spade-shaped antlers swept back from its skull like raised wings, making several orbits around the arena before at last it took notice of the guards. Startled by its appearance, someone had flung a pike at the animal. Their throw was perfect. It sailed through the green glimmer of the stag's muscled shoulder, but the ethereal creature bucked like it had been hit, kicking out both sets of legs before at last rearing onto its hind hooves. The guards had accounted for dumb instinct, animal reflexes tethered to the trigger points of pain and rapture. But Scala, beautiful and voracious, Scala of the mangrove-strangled monsoons and the fireflies and the wildfires that sang giddily of new seasons, Scala's wildlife, down to the last coral-striped ant, was cannier than that. The stag did not panic. It barreled down on its assailant, shimmering antlers bent at a 90-degree angle, rage in its eyes and in the set of its expression. The guard had enough time to inhale before the stag, taller than Luno's finest by several hands, scooped him up and flung him into a wall. A crack, short and sudden and sickening, his body wrinkled to a heap as he slid down onto the floor. Vivian landed delicately beside the stage, arcbow still at ready. The palaka worm's last triumphant bellow shuddered through the arena, its percussions amplified by the acoustics of the theater, so loud that it thinned the world in Vivian's ears to a whine. It was followed by shouting. She snapped a look across the Colosseum, gaze walking up the tiered seats to where the Baron of Verneau stood in the aisles, ringed by men with crossbows. Her surviving pursuers stood with them. "You!" His voice, oratorical, carried easily to where Vivian crouched. The planeswalker bared a snarl. "This place is an abomination!" Something flared in the Baron's gaze, a look not unlike recognition, half-smile fixing itself in place as he descended the steps. Only a handful more arrows. Vivian narrowed her eyes at the crossbows, wondering which of her magical menagerie to call. The wasps or the rainbow-breasted birds with the scimitar beaks, the devouring worm, the grizzly bear from her earliest memories, smelling of cold water and mountains and animal spore. You rurals are always the same, always so sure of the shape of the world. The word spilled like oil, slick. Always so frightened of the idea of change. Do you have any idea as to how many of you I have seen, how many of you I have dealt with. Half of the Baron's entourage poured past him and down into the fray where corpses lay, gleaming slickly. They broke into 2 rows. The first went down to their knees, while the second stood braced. They took aim at the Hydra as it began to come apart in a convulsion of emerald sparks. Speeches are such a thing with tyrants, aren't they? Vivian freed another arrow from her quiver. The wasps, she decided. People like you are so in love with your voice. Tyrant! His laughter was effervescent. Please, mademoiselle, I am nothing but a humble researcher. Even my barony was forced upon me. A gift from Her Royal Highness. Vivian thought back to her first glimpse of the Queen, of the sharp-featured face beneath its stiff crown of marble curls, that unsmiling mouth and abstracted gaze, attention already elsewhere. She had sat slumped at her throne, chin held in the cup of her palm, bored with the tableau, bored with the cruelty. Such a woman wouldn't play at favorites. But the Baron did not look like a man who cared. Whatever the case, Vivian knocked her arrow, every motion deliberate. The crossbowman railed around the Baron. I will see Luneau pay for what it has done to this world. This time they did not hesitate. They released their crossbow bolts only to see their assault sail harmlessly through the Hydra, even as it finally dissipated. I'm sure you'd like that, but what I would like is to know more about that bow of yours. The Baron's gaze ticked to the arc bow in Vivian's grip. What a fascinating weapon. How do you use it? Where do your creatures come from? In answer, Vivian let fly her arrow. Wasps corkscrewed from the ensuing contrails, translucent wings iridescent for a moment before they shook loose of the enchantment, the insects coalescing into a swarm so thick it darkened the air. Vivian sprinted forward in their wake, feeling every copper-banded body thrum beneath her thoughts. The lambent wasps were the size of hounds, of horses, all with appetites to match. No queen in sight, no nest, but that hardly mattered. Hunger was even older than the memory of them. Scala! Vivian panted as she traded the arc bow for her daggers. The wasps parted, revealing the Baron, hands pressed together as though in prayer, his smile serene. We are the dead of Scala! She brought her blades down and twisted. Felt steel slot between ribs, felt the iron catch in soft tissue. Vivian jerked her wrist and the dagger sliced through the membrane. But the Baron's placid expression did not change. He only looked up, and when he smiled, full teeth, Vivian had a moment to think on how red his tongue was, how plump his mouth, and how much he reminded her of a sated lamprey. His fingers closed down around Vivian's own, almost tender, his touch scorching. My turn. The Baron backhanded Vivian, a blow so casual, so artless, that Vivian found herself surprised by its force. She skidded backward, away from the point of impact. A wet heat dribbled along the corner of her jaw. Vivian mopped at her chin with the back of her hand and snarled. Ah, were you expecting a dandy then? The Baron's voice stayed mild. He wrenched Vivian's daggers from his chest and flung them onto the floor. I'm afraid I'd have to I'll manage. You couldn't rely on weapons alone in Scala. Nature did not wait for duels, for rituals, for men to unsheathe their swords. Often it was nothing but tooth and talon and tendon. Vivian spun into a roundhouse kick, stopping the Baron mid-sentence, hooking a leg along the shoulder, allowing momentum to pull them both down onto the ground. Pain burst along her shoulder. The fall hadn't gone quite right. She had taken too much of the Baron's weight on her, but Vivian refused to be deterred. She reared up, bringing the arc bow down like a bludgeon, taking aim at the Baron's temple. Vivian managed 3 sharp shots to her quarry's head before his minions arrived to drag her away. Vivian fought, rapidly, and with the bitter abandon of someone who had run out of things to lose. She took 2 guards to unconsciousness with her, the first with strategic kick to the head, the other with a blow from an elbow. one so forceful that Vivian heard the small bones of the man crack in the recoil. It was, she decided as awareness bled from her, at least a decent last stand. So that's part 1, guys. You can find this story for free on Magic the Gathering's website under their lore tab. I really suggest it. There's 3 parts, so you're already a third of the way through if you've been listening. So I highly suggest, if you are a person who loves animals, go finish this story. If you're a person who loves fantasy, go finish this story. Thank you for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe.